Solvete omnes. This is Brent Cavito. I'm here with my second scholarship report for Latin 600 Vergil. I'm going to be talking about an article written by Luca Grillo titled Leaving Troy and Creusa, Reflections on Aeneas's Flight. It was published by Camwis in the Classical Journal in 2010. The stable URL is displayed there, but I also included a link where I posted this in the drive, if you would like to read it for yourself. Okay, so the overview of Grillo's article. The Creusa episode in Book 2 of the Aeneid challenges a straightforward understanding of Aeneas's heroism when it is set against the intertextual context of other relevant husband and wife scenes. The second part of it is that Aeneas's narration of the events casts him as consistently unaware of the important issues, but it sets Creusa as a model wife and a divinity, whose prophecy completes Hector's and Venus's. So, some stark contrast. The thesis of Grillo's paper, or article, is that the Aeneas who flees from Troy and loses Creusa is not a plain model of sensibility and virtue, as commentators have believed until recently. Vergil's language, intertextual references, and narrative choices elicit open-ended and ambiguous interpretations, and thus necessarily complicate the issue of Aeneas's pietas. So before Vergil, there were a number of different versions of the flight from Troy, and variations on the character of Creusa as well. So he had some choices to make, but the structure of the Aeneid only had a few restrictions that he had to work with. One is that Creusa has to be one of Priam's daughters. Otherwise, Ascanius loses his lineage, and so does Augustus. She cannot be one of the captive women, or Aeneas is on a whole other unheroic than we will be discussing in this research report. And she also must disappear before Dido enters the scene, because, as we know, Aeneas has enough trouble with just one woman. So, now, the way Vergil handles this scene has caused a pretty interesting debate between scholars as to whose side one should take, given the very deliberate way in which it is laid out. Some sympathize with Aeneas, and others side with Creusa against Aeneas. Now, in this article, Grillo looks at this scene, comparing it with Hector and Andromache in Iliad Book 6, and Orpheus and Eurydice in Vergil's own Georgics Book 4. The first work to which Vergil refers is the Iliad's Book 6. He makes his connection by mentioning Hector, Andromache, Astyanax, the narrow passages of Troy, and Priam's palace in basically the same order. It's as though Aeneas is walking in Hector's footsteps. But then they encounter the same series of women, Helen, their mothers, and their wives. These intertextual links invite the reader to contrast the two heroes' behavior, and the comparison is unfavorable for Aeneas. Despite displaying pietas toward his father and son, Aeneas lacks Hector's tender care for his wife. So let's look at this more closely. Hector runs into Helen in Paris's house when he's in there cleaning his armor. He then leaves them after having this moment when he reflects on how she's the cause of all of this. He leaves them to find Hecuba, his mother, but then he leaves her on his own to go find his wife. And in the scene with Hector and Andromache, Hector just does what Hector does. When Aeneas runs into Helen, it's in the streets, and he is so enraged by seeing her that he plans revenge on her. And so in each scene, the hero reflects on the fact that Helen is the cause of all of this suffering. But Hector conducts himself very well, whereas Aeneas is so mad that he almost kills her. Now, the only thing that stops him from killing her is that Venus, his mother, appears. She tells him to get over it and to go find his family. So here we have a complete inversion of the scene with Hecuba, where Hector ran into her after leaving Helen and then left her to go find his own wife. When Aeneas finally finds Creusa, she's dead, and again she appears to him. He's not very affectionate to her, and doesn't even try to hug her until after she's already gone. Now here is just some of the text that is relevant for this argument. In bold are two phrases that we're going to be looking at shortly. longe seruet vestigia conjux and pone subit conjux. So let's take a look. The other intertextual reference that Virgil makes is to his own Orpheus and Eurydice story in Georgic's Book 4. There are thematic and linguistic similarities. In each story, the hero is attempting to rescue their wife from almost certain doom. In each instance, the wife must follow behind, and in both stories, neither hero is successful. The phrase dulcis conjunx is used in each story. The phrase iamque vale is how each wife says goodbye in the exact same metrical position. In the Creusa episode, Creusa pone subit, whereas Eurydice pone sequens, and both heroes call out for their wife at the end repeatedly in the story. Now, those are the similarities, but there are some differences. The phrase dulcis conjunx is inverted. At the first time around, Orpheus uses it to Eurydice, and so it's an expression of his affection for her. In the Aeneid, Creusa calls Aeneas her dulcis conjunx. So the same affection is expressed, but from the wife to the hero, rather than from the hero to the wife. This phrase will appear again in a few minutes, so hold on to it. But then the word respexit is fatal for Eurydice, but not looking back is fatal for Creusa, and Aeneas says himself, nec respexi. And so, Orpheus loses Eurydice because he loves her too much, but Aeneas seems to lose Creusa because he loves too little. Now, Hector in the Iliad makes it perfectly clear where his priorities would be should the day of Troy's destruction ever come. And he himself says it's inevitable, but he says that his wife and family would be the foremost cause of his grief, at least. When it comes to escaping from Troy, Aeneas does not seem to share these priorities, as he has Creusa follow longe. And then he goes on to say pone subit conjunx, and then ultimately that his wife fefellit. He's blaming everyone and everything but himself. Fefellit is a word that very strongly suggests that she has let him down or broken some sort of deal they had. It's very strong, and he never uses it in a polite way. Virgil, that is. But the problem with all of this is that throughout her appearance in the story, Creusa appears as a pretty model wife. She upholds all of the standards that we at least expect of Roman women. She assures Aeneas that the Greeks have not gotten to her and that her fides is safe, and she is happy to remain univira. In short, Creusa does not possess an individual personality, but in everything she does, she is a model Roman wife. Now, there are two levels to Aeneas' character in all of this. One is that during the event itself, he is not always on task. His mother has to redirect him, and he describes himself as out of his mind. Now, then there's the fact that Aeneas is actually telling this story. So he was both out of his mind during it, and as he retells it, he doesn't seem to always be that much more back in it. When Creusa finally appears, she sort of completes this trilogy of divinities appearing to Aeneas. Hector only worries, though, for the destiny of Troy, whereas his mother, Venus, only worries for Aeneas' family. When Creusa appears, she is described as simulacrum, umbra, and maior imago, so she linguistically fits as this divinity as well. But then she is concerned with Ascanius and the future, whereas Aeneas, as soon as he leaves from her, of course, goes searching for his father and is therefore stuck still in the past. But anyway, Creusa completes this prophecy, and she's the first one to actually tell Aeneas where he's going when she says, "You will come to the land Hesperia." So, in conclusion, in the loss of Creusa, this unawareness is mixed with a strong feeling of disappointment, colored with frustration and dismayed resentment, as when an expectation is deluded or a covenant betrayed. Thus, by including these elements of forgetfulness, resentment, frustration, and disappointment in Aeneas' account of the loss of Creusa, Virgil presents a completely straightforward understanding of his pietas. All right, thanks for watching. Here's the title slide again, in case you want to look that up. All right. Walete.